don't normally do videos without a massive idea of what I want to talk about, but I have a few hours spare. I've made a lot of videos recently, and people seem to like my opinions, and I like giving them because I'm very opinionated. Feel free to put what you think of that in the comments. No, I'm joking. Today's focus, really, no pun intended as usual, is something that has really come on the radar rather recently. Now, the Mark 1 preservation group is going very well. We have over 300 members that have joined the group. And we are seeing a number, and I would say a record number of Mark 1s that I've not seen in many years joining the group, which are practically like as if they came out the factory. And the owners of these cars have said they've pretty much had them from new. Some people have recently bought theirs and they've bought an absolute gem, but a lot of people have had these Mark 1s for many, many years. And I'm thinking, where have these cars been? They have literally been in the doldrums, in the bushes. And this group has given them an opportunity to show their cars off and to be proud of their cars, which they should very much be. It is a modern classic now, not in the making, it's a modern classic now. It is the most common modern classic car, and that is probably why people do not view it as such, because it is just seen all over the place. There is no car from that time, from 1998 to 2005, or anywhere from the mid-90s to the mid-noughties, where you will see a car from that period as commonly as a Mark 1 Focus today on the roads, which kind of accentuates my straightforward summary of the Mark 1 being the greatest hatchback from that time. There is no other car that touches it. It's Ford's greatest car for a very long time. You name me a Ford car that is better, and no, the Transit is not a car. We can't class the Transit car. A more influential and more important car in Ford's history. Naturally, there have been some exceptionally important Ford cars over the period's history. I mean, you could argue the Ford Model T is the most important, and I think it is in that respect. It always will be. And the Mark 1 follows on from that ethos of class, but also being more of an everyday man's car, and could appeal to a wide variety of markets and customer needs. And the Mark 1 ticked all the boxes. It was successful in North America, which a lot of smaller cars are certainly not, have never been successful in America, particularly small European cars. Yes, there are exceptions to that rule, but the Mark 1 did quite a good job in America, being predominantly a European car. The Mark 1 was never designed to be a world car. The Mark 3 was designed to be a world car, not the Mark 1 or the Mark 2. The Mark 2 did not sell as well as a Mark 1. And the Mark 1 for me, as a car in itself, it not only propelled Ford for the next 10, 15 years and re-established Ford's reputation for being a maker of fantastic drivers' cars, something that as they've had briefly in the past with cars like your Cortinas and your Capris, absolutely blooming amazing cars, and they drove like nothing else. Yeah, okay, some of the reliability wasn't great, but then every car of that period rusted and fell to bits within about 5 years, unless you were very, very on top of the maintenance. And the Mark 1 really hit the button in terms of being the greatest driving hatchback maybe ever, because no tester ever criticised it. When it came out, nobody could criticise it because it was just that good. It was fun. For the price point of, what, £11,000 potentially at launch? That's just a bargain on wheels, and people knew it. The testers loved it. Top Gear loved it. Clarkson loved it. Everybody loved it. And that reputation carried on. It was Britain's best-selling car throughout the Mark 1's life. It was the #1 best-selling car in the UK, and it never got toppled. And for a hatchback to have achieved that, that's quite an achievement, because usually it's super minis that are usually at the top of the #1 UK sales charts. The Fiesta wasn't quite the car at that stage as it was when it became the Mark 7, and then it got better. I think the Mark 2 Focus just wasn't as good as Mark 7 Fiesta in some respects, and many people made the swap over, particularly as Ford's prices then started to go up and up and up and up. Especially with the late Mark II and the early Mark III Focus. And what I still see today in the market of Mark 1s are just cheap cars. How are they still so cheap? There's so many out there that I've seen that have come on the radar, that some of these are fantastic survivors. I mean, there was a 1.4 CL up for about 795 the other day, and honestly, you'll get the usual comments on people saying it's gutless, it's got no power. They are fractionally underpowered, the Sigmas. They're like 75 horsepower in a car of the Focus Mark 1 size, even though it's a relatively light car. It's not a Fiesta size. It's going to be a little bit more underpowered, but nothing ridiculously bad. I think usually people compare them to the bigger engines, and that's your problem. If you compare them to the bigger engines, then it's always going to not be as good, is it? But as a car, it's absolutely fine. And the CLs are no frills, just everything you need in a Mark 1 Focus and nothing else. And this particular car was in superb condition. Someone's bought it, I believe. And I go on eBay now and I see a lot of these sort of more mundane poverty spec models like the CL, the LX, your D-Tex, your common as muck cars. And we're not even talking about ST170s and gears. And there's a lot of bids on these, and they're all hovering over the £1,000 mark now. Getting a good Mark 1 for under £1,000 is very hard, and usually they just go like nothing. That was a terrible one. That's better. So you've got that as well, and we have a huge amount of models that are still in circulation. As I say, there are plenty of Mark 1s still around, and my advice, I keep banging on about this to people who haven't got one, who are thinking of getting one: get a good one and hang on to it, because they're now going up a little bit, and this is great. This is something that I didn't see when I originally started the channel about a year and a half ago, or close to now. Values were still higher than what they were, because second-hand car values jumped up a little bit because of COVID and the chip shortage, and every second-hand car went up, but the Focus was still at the bottom end. And for what you're getting, it's ridiculous. Now, I don't like to rubbish any other cars, but if you take Rover 45s, they're brilliant cars. They're brilliant cars. If you don't want a Mark 1 Focus, go and get a Rover 45. They're even better cars in some respects for the amount of money you pay. They're cheaper than Mark 1s predominantly. Nobody really thinks about owning one, but if you get a good one like the one I've got, flipping heck, you're onto a win of a car. You can't get better. I don't think there are many cars that will have the toys and the pedigree of that car for the price point you're paying for. Mark 1s are slightly more expensive, but naturally that's because it's Ford, and when everything is a Ford, it's more expensive. And I think people have just started to realise the Escort scenario, which I've talked about so many times on this channel in these little bloggy episodes. And people back in the day used to have Escorts and Fiestas and all those cars, and they used to drive them into the ground, bin them, get another one, and then eventually they just move on to more modern cars. They might have had a Mark 1 Focus. They'd have probably had a Mark 1 Focus. I don't know where you were if you didn't have one. If you've had Escorts and Fiestas in the 80s, 90s, if you've bypassed Mark 1s, I don't know how that has happened, because just no. So you've got that scenario carrying on, and people have moved on to modern cars, and some people are going back now to buying Mark 1s as a nostalgia thing, but also the realisation that Escorts now and Fiestas of the 80s and 90s, they're not rare, but in some cases they are. They're much more harder to get now than they used to be, especially in good nick. And they've gone up massively in price. You could get, I'm looking at a Mark III Fiesta. I think Mark III Fiestas are fantastic cars, and I would like to own one because I think that is a cracking car. I think the Mark II it's just a re-facelift Mark 1. The Mark III was a different beast underneath. and it really set Ford up for the 90s, that car. But a lot of these classics, they've gone through the roof now in terms of their value, when people thought they wouldn't be worth much at all. And I think people have learnt the lesson there. Now, Escorts, let's face it, Escorts are nowhere near as good as a Focus. The Escort really lost its way, and there's no way that you can say an Escort is a better car than a Focus Mark 1. It just isn't. I think most people can conclude on that one. But that's a bit unfair to the Escort because it was it was a good car for its time. It was a good car at best, but the Focus was an excellent car. And the difference, as I've said before, between a good and excellent car in the car manufacturing world is a heaven and earth. And because of that, people are now thinking, got to get a Mark 1 Focus, because these, if Escorts are now going for £3,000, £4,000, £6,000 £6,000 at least in mint condition, maybe more in some cases if they're rare examples, XRs, etc. People are thinking, do you know what, Ford Focus Mark 1s, ST170, good car to go for, or the top of the range models, the ones that you think would probably be more worthwhile, and they probably will be, ST170s certainly. But now people have got into the mindset of, I need to get one, because if I don't get one, I'm going to miss the boat. And getting a good one, stick to it, because they're going to be valuable. Yeah, you're not going to make money off them. Let's face it. Unless you've got a warehouse where you can stuff about 100 Mark 1s in, and then just wait about 10 years and then start selling them off. Brilliant. That's a great business proposition. That I don't even think that would work, but if I had the space, I certainly would. But it is the way it is. But people are now have woken up to that factor now, that Escorts have got to that price, but Focus Mark 1s are a better car, so they're going to be worth probably more. Maybe there are a lot of factors that are going to play into this, because we're in a world now where it's anti-ICE car, internal combustion engine cars. It's anti. The tax on Mark 1s is dreadful. After 2001, it's awful. I mean, even if it's pre-2001 and it goes on the engine size, if it's not a 1.4 CL, you're going to be paying through the nose. And it's even worse. I mean, the last time I looked for my 1.6 automatic, £360. I'm paying monthly. That's £1 a day I'm paying for that car. And most of the time, it's not on the road. You know what I mean? It's just crazy. They want these cars off the road. They're trying their best. Clean air zones, ULEZ. I mean, there's a conspiracy theory now that the ULEZ zone that London have done is going to come to other cities. And if they do it in Birmingham, I'm stuffed. But I don't think they will somehow. I think there'll be too much of a problem to decide where the boundary is, or whether they're just going to say the whole Birmingham is a ULEZ zone. And I really think that's too far, that is. There's going to be serious problems if they start doing that. But it's possible, because we live in that world now. It is completely one agenda, and that is EV, 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 because that's the only way of helping the Conservative Party to boost their shares in EV car manufacturers. Oh, sorry, I said it out loud, didn't I? Because ultimately that's where we're going. Apparently, EV is the future. I don't think it is. E-fuels, synthetic fuels. Why is this not a thing? And why is it? I don't know. It should be a thing, but it isn't. Synthetic fuels are a way that these cars could be powered in the future. But the problem is it's going to be so minute. It's going to be expensive. I can't see it being anything more than an expensive rich man's exercise, which will mean that a lot of these cars are just not usable in the future. When that will be, I don't know, but I hope to God in my lifetime I'll be an old man by the time that we can't put petrol in these cars, because then I'll be done. So that's my attitude. It seems to be a lot of other people's attitude, and this is the other factor. I've been speaking to a few people recently of a certain experienced age. I'd say wise and experienced age, I will put it that way. And they have bought Focus Mark 1s. There's two of them, the two guys I'm talking to, and they've both bought a Mark 1 Focus, because they've basically bought it as a retirement present, a really good one for about £1,500. One of them's a Gear, one of them's a Z-Tech, and their idea is that they're going to completely avoid electric cars because look, they're going to say, look, I've got one of the chaps, and you know who you are, and you don't mind me saying this because I know you won't. Right, you've got 15, 20 years left at best. So the idea is that Focus Mark 1 is going to last you another 15, 20 years with regular maintenance and lots of work just to keep the upkeep so that you never have to get behind the wheel of an EV. That's a good idea, that is. And that idea is copied by a lot of people. How many people are who have actually got a couple of classic cars, so at least they've got one functioning car at any one time, so they never have to drive anything like an EV. I wish I was, in some respects, I wish I was not of this generation to experience that, because I'm too young, unfortunately, to avoid all this. I will have to drive an EV in my lifetime, whether I like it or not. I say I'll have to be forced. I think it will have to be forced on me. That is just my mindset. Internal combustion is just in here and it's not going to go away. How will this affect Mark 1 take-up? It won't now, because petrol prices are stable. There is a war against motorists to push them to EVs, but it's not working because people are going to fight it, and we are going to fight it in whatever way we can, aren't we? And I say fight it because it is a bit of a war at the moment, and it may be a problem in 15, 20 years time. We don't know how the landscape of motoring is going to change, but at the moment, just buy one and hang on to it, because you don't know what's around the corner. There could be something really serious, something that could cause everything to change again. COVID did, or did it? I don't think so, actually. Maybe COVID just revealed some things we don't like about the world we live in. So yeah, that's really all I've got to say on this little bloggy episode, as usual. But if you want a Mark 1, get one, because they're not hanging around no more. People are starting to basically wake up to the fact that there's less good ones around now. I was saying this 2 years ago, and it's now more relevant today, but I think people have just suddenly struck that they need to invest in one, because these are going to be cracking cars in the future, and there's nothing like them, and there won't be anything like them again. And it's all about enjoying them as much as possible, and keeping as many on the roads as possible. I'd hope to think that there is a good 5 to 10,000 of these left, and most of them will be in the hands of enthusiasts in a few years' time. Take care, guys. I will see you very soon. I don't know what episode it's going to be, but hey, see you soon.